You have been in Montreux several times. Always Claude Nobs was part of the adventure. What memories do you keep out of it?
Two people who were associated very fondly and deeply with both me as a solo performer, Led Zeppelin, I think, to some degree, and definitely Claude, and that's Daniel Erdweider and Jacqueline d'Envion. And Daniel lives, do you know him?
No.
Oh my goodness. Well, he worked with Claude. He's a champion skier, really spectacular guy. But he also worked for a while in London for Atlantic Records. Mm-hmm. So he came from the kind of this environment of jazz into England, and then was associated quite a lot with Armit. I mean, my whole link with everything, the sort of common denominator of all things, really, with spirit and just joy, has always been through my associations. Mm-hmm. Last time I saw Armit and Claude was actually here.
Really?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. In one of your last concerts?
I was invited to sing at a tribute to Armit Ertegun. Mm-hmm. Claude contacted me and said that there was going to be a night of tribute. And it was very funny because it was very humorous, because Kid Rock came with an entourage which included Armit and also Stevie Nicks. Mm-hmm. And it was dreadful. The two of them did a Led Zeppelin duet. And I mean, can you imagine them singing in harmony together? It was so funny. And of course, Claude and Armit were going, yeah, this is great. Well, I guess it was great for the cameras or whatever it was, but it was very funny. And I spent a good, pleasant evening or two with Claude and Armit at that time. The tribute was to Armit for, I guess, the encouragement and the interlinking between Claude when he went over to New York in '65. Mm-hmm. And
have you read his book, the big book that he wrote? 5 huge things that came out. He talks a lot about it too, about his first appearing in.
Well, yeah, you know, I mean, it was a very interesting and brave. No, I mean, he was a huge catalyst, Claude, and a great encourager, and not a great singer, you know, but he was like in the thick of the whole thing all the time. And the fact that he made his way into that scene in New York, and I think with Armit and his brother Nessery running the jazz side of Atlantic, it was a perfect marriage. And really, whatever else Claude did, as far as working with other labels and other sparkling entities, I don't know too much about. All I know is the stuff that involved me either being here or Armit's involvement with him, and the whole sort of interesting tea dance between jazz musicians and rock and roll musicians, which was quite something. You know, there's a kind of very interesting social phenomena between jazz and rock, and it's a little bit like, you know, classical musicians looking at us and going, we now currently have a guy who plays in the Vortex jazz scene in London, the sort of the end or the beginning of the new post-bebop. He's our drummer, and he's such a snob. It's very funny. So for Led Zeppelin or myself to collide with all these other musicians, the interplay and the chemistry was very funny. And I've always looked upon it as being quite comical myself, and also beautiful, you know, musically.
Mm-hmm. Well, Charles Lloyd, for instance, whom he brought as the first jazz musician, you probably knew Charles Lloyd, right, in the 60s, actually was really trying to mix and combining rock and jazz and bringing them together. At that time, it was the early psychedelic years.
Sure, like Don Cherry and people like that. Yeah, it was really good. And you know, in America in 1968, we were working a lot on the Bill Graham scene. So we would be playing with Woody Herman, or we'd be in San Francisco playing on the same bill as Rahsaan Roland Kirk. We Free Kings, you know, it was like And the mélange, which was absolutely spectacular. So the idea of this actually taken off or being encouraged in Montreux by Claude with his diligence and his capacity as from the clerical side of things, apart from the musical overview, he was a great entrepreneur, and so for that reason he was able to seduce, and he was probably the center of the fulcrum between these two cultures of the very, what I would have said was pretty conservative society here. And these guys wandering in with their tenor saxophones and their sort of the John Coltrane school of drama, you know, it's great, really good. But with Claude, I mean, we weren't really, our relationship with Claude was strong, but we weren't part of the jazz festival, you know. I didn't actually become an artist in the jazz festival until after the end of Led Zeppelin, you know. But nonetheless, we still, we worked with Claude 3 times here. We were drawn here, and it's right to say that with that commune down the road on the Route de Chillon, or whatever it is, and there was a kind of contretemps. There was something else going on between the youth movement in Europe and this town in some very strange way. And Claude was very understanding of that, and his sort of relationship with Led Zepp allowed that to flourish, I think.
Claude Nobs was your European promoter in 1970, and at that time the name Led Zeppelin was contested by the descendant of Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin. She even wanted to have your Copenhagen concert cancelled. Is it true that the band was billed The Nobs for that concert February 28, 1970?
That's true, but we don't really know because we can't remember, and I don't speak to very many people from that time now. Some of them have lost the gift of speech, sadly. But I can't remember whether it was a dedication to our friend Claude or whether it was a reference to the male sex organ, which in colloquial terms in England is
the knobs.
Called a knob, yeah. Oh my goodness me. We can always cut that out. Whichever way, I'm sure it applied to Claude, no matter what.
But it was built, the Nobs, for that evening, huh? People went to the concert to see the Nobs.
Well, they knew really secretly that but we can't take in vain the name of that great family. I'm sure that what Count von Zeppelin did was fantastic, you know, for the whole of the world peace and soliloquy throughout Europe. But I don't know who did the most damage, really, whether it was Led Zepp or his flying machines, I'm not sure. But whatever it is, we were the Nobs, and we were happy to be the Nobs, yeah. And, you know, Claude used to encourage us to, with Jacqueline and Danielle, and it was a good fraternity, and we could bring our families, and we could enjoy mystical treats like raclette and stuff. We were kids, you know. I was 22.
Now that you mentioned that, I realize, and I know what you mean. This Daniel, he wrote something about. Was he living in this commune, Daniel? Was he living in this commune near Veto or somewhere at that
I don't
time?
know. Maybe he was. I don't know.
Because it seems it rings a bell now. Eventually, now that you mentioned.
Yeah, and so I mean, we were welcomed, and as kids, I mean. Really, basically, I was 22 years old, and this is an intriguing and wondrous environment coming from semi-industrial Middle England. So to bring my wife here and to just go, wow, I must be doing very well. You know, it's a beautiful environment. It's so.
But tell me about this, what you notice when you mentioned very truly that it's a mixture between conservatism and in fact, possibility for progressive music to occur, which in fact was quite advanced and yet conservative. How do you explain this, this mixture of both things?
Well, I don't know what the explanation is because I wasn't here a month before and a month after the sort of deluge, so I wouldn't know. all I know was, because we didn't really have too much to do with local society, obviously. They sort of parceled us into cars and took us to rented accommodation on the top of a hill where a cow was mooing and a bell was ringing. But Claude's hospitality and his encouragement was, you know, very, very special. And it was it was such a trip, because in so many places around, especially around America, the kind of conservative element in America, we were treated like animals. You know, I mean, let's not forget that the whole hippie movement was considered to be evil and challenging the, you know, the political structure of America, which it did during the times of the Vietnam War. It tried to move mountains, and so you could be. I walked the streets of Dearborn in Detroit when Detroit was on fire to get lunch. And a car, I remember a Lincoln Continental slowing down and the guy putting the window down and spitting at me because I was scum. But here, you know, with Paris in turmoil and all that stuff going on and London people on the streets, somehow this was like a kind of some very strange and very interesting cultural exchange, which somehow allowed all of us to coexist. But I didn't stay around 2 weeks later to hear what the bric-a-brac was from the Count, what's his name down the road, or the Prince of Schleswig-Holstein, who's up the hill somewhere.
You have been in Montreux several times. What experience do you have from Montreux? Is this a public that is different from the one you found in other places? Could you notice a difference?
I can't remember, to be honest. All I can say is that I knew that it was an international public here. It was as if there was some sort of lodestone that brought us, lots of us here. Once the game began, there was no explanation for it except for energy. And I think the energy and the lure of the combination of Claude's bright and clever thinking, Led Zeppelin's energy and power and reputation, and the need for European kids to find some place where they could actually say, this is our scene here. It was part of the time, you know, sign of the times. It was magnificent, really, you know. And I was very proud to be a part of it. I mean, really, I was just a singer. And the stuff that I experienced was, you know, it's life-changing, really. Mm-hmm. Those huge surges of energy. And in the middle of it all, Claude was going, yes, they must come back. This is working. And of course it did work. And with the jazz festival, I was looking at the people who were playing in 1970. And in fact, you know, I mean, I can't imagine the amount of meticulous arranging with very, very questionable agents in America to get Gatemouth Brown, you know, to get Professor Longhair, to get all these fantastically juxtaposed people against, you know, all of the bona fide post-bebop jazz players of the day, and then all these kind of blues guys, and then slowly creeping in became more of little bits and pieces of the rock scene moving into it, which is perfect, you know.
You participate in many festivals all around the world. Is there anything special about the Montreux Jazz Festival?
Well, you know, obviously, physically and cerebrally, the intentions are totally different. There's no equivalent at all. They're on different levels altogether. I mean, it's like comparing Woodstock to Montreux. No, maybe Woodstock had far more heart because it was the beginning of the new days, if you like. But there's no comparison, really. This was always an exposition. And I mean, I've played here a few times since 1980, since the end of Led Zeppelin. And again, the detail and the variety, it had to extend beyond jazz. because so many of the exponents were on their way up or down. There wasn't that much, there's great players, but the players with reputation who'd come from the 50s through, had gone. So obviously the thing has to broaden out a little bit. But the locations and the size, when we used to play the Casino, and then on, and now the Stravinsky Hall or whatever it is, they allow a different form of expression for the audience. It's nothing to do with the kind of chaos of a rock festival at all. Mm-hmm. And the thing about those festivals, I played last night in Belfort, and two nights before that in Werchter in Belgium, and you've got the huge artists of the day presenting amazing productions which are mind-boggling. It's Disney World, it's crazy. The free-form elements of what I used to see here was very respectful, demure, and it didn't have any of that flash that I've just been through the last couple of days. And okay, that's fine. It's a different world.
But quiet? Would you say a bit quiet type of?
Here?
Yeah. Would you name it as a bit?
Well, no. I think it was trying to go about what it was trying to do, and it worked. Mm-hmm. When I first played here as a solo artist, I mean, I was kind of chuckling to myself really, because I was desperate in the 80s to try and create a kind of fusion of 60s, 70s music that I'd been associated with contemporary beginnings of that new structure of computer-driven pop. So what I was doing was really very questionable. I believed 100% in it, but the audience found it very difficult, and I was in the middle of these exposés and going, what am I doing here? And Claude made a good fist of it. He tried to pretend he thought it was great, but I think he was going, geez, what is this guy doing now,
Yet he always wanted you to come back. I mean, that's he never stopped enjoying what you did continuously up to now, I would say, if he ever hears.
Well, I did come back with Jimmy Page in at some point, I can't remember when, in the 90s.
Yeah, I
and
think
we did a rockabilly, we did a tribute to Shelby Singleton and Sun Records.
2001, actually. You came in 2001 with Jimmy Page here.
Did I? Mm. And we did it was a rockabilly evening, and it was all right. It wasn't great, But and the next night Dylan played, and those were sort of tangential away from the festival, but running either concurrently or in the same ether, I think. A bit like Led Zepp was, I mean, we weren't part of the jazz festival, but we were definitely keeping a relationship with Claude and coming here because we thought that the whole thing was a catalyst for all of us, for the commune, for the people, for ourselves, for Claude. It was a very encouraging family feel.
Robert Plant, you are a singer. Your voice is, of course, is unique in the history of rock. Could we talk about the history of your voice? Did you always sing as a boy?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and I was always transported and teleported by the voice. My mum sang constantly in this kind of quasi-operatic style around the house, bouncing. She was the issue of cousins, and she tended to bounce a lot as she sang. And I loved singing, and I used to go to... I just believed I could listen to Mario Lanza, who, was a Hollywood hero, but at the same time, the way that he recorded for RCA, the Student Prince and those sort of things, that kind of quasi-operatic stuff, had so much atmosphere that I wasn't in the position to judge whether he was brilliant or not. I was just moved by that sort of largesse of singing. And then I heard Little Richard and Elvis. There was not very much radio in England that was ever going to be representative of youth culture. I could hear American Forces Network radio coming out of Germany, if I was lucky, at night when I'd finished my homework. And I was always moved by the black voice. So as a kid, I think I leaned really towards all that Chicago R&B, and I fell into the Mississippi, the origins of it, if you like, at least on American soil, a little bit later on. But by the time I was 15, I was in a band singing Jimmy Reed songs, and I was playing washboard in a skiffle group, listening to Lead Belly and Blind Lemon Jefferson, and I still play Lemon Jefferson on my laptop now in the morning with a little amp on it. And my lady friend goes, "How long have you been obsessed by this?" And I said, "Probably since the first tears I wept." It's so good, beautiful, you know. So yeah, I've been lucky to be transported by.
Did you ever think of a future like the one that you happen to have lived? Did you ever think that, okay, one day I'm just going to be just a singer recognized as one, if not the best singer of rock history? Is it something that crossed your mind ever?
Well, you know, it's a very charming thing to say, but you know, even though rock was what it was, everything changes. So there's exponents change like the seasons. And when I was a kid, I overcooked it vocally. I pushed too much. There was no finesse, but I was part of a period of time. And I was in the best possible band on the planet at that time for what that was. So there was a home for me and my youth and my expression then. But things change. So times change, and I've learned down the line, I've learned a lot of things. I'm always very, very keen to be a student of all elements of music. And by not playing too proficiently, I can make judgments based on emotion rather than technique. I think that's really always been the criteria of my raison d'etre, if you like, really. So I made very odd records and very trite records and very strong records, and I think when I went to Tennessee 7 or 8 years ago and I started working with Alison Krauss, I was fortunate because I was invited to play at a tribute to Lead Belly. I think Ahmet was there actually, and I shared the stage with Odetta and Harry Belafonte and Clarence Gate-Math Brown, who'd spent time in Montreux. And Alison Krauss joined me, and we did a couple of Lead Belly pieces. And I invited Los Lobos to come, but asked them if they would only bring their Mexican instruments, the acoustic stuff. So ironically, we did a version of Poor Howard, which is on the new record that will come out in September, which is probably long gone by now when you watch this.
No.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I went to Nashville. I started hanging out there because there was a sort of I was encouraged to go there. There was a different element of musicality there, and the kind of competitive aspects of rock, the rock sort of clientele, the rock persona, has a lot of ego attached to it, and sometimes it's quite destructive. And I'd had enough. I just wanted to go somewhere where people actually were very happy. They'd all come from different backgrounds and come into Nashville to try and create maybe the glorious days of RCA recordings, you know, with Chet Atkins and Floyd Kramer and all those great recordings that were made at RCA. Musicians were drawn there, and I ended up playing with a lot of them and learning to sing in a totally different way. Because I had to sing harmonies with Alison Krauss, and she'd been recording since she was 13 and knew exactly what to do. And she was mesmerized by the fact that I couldn't sing the same line twice. I had no idea of how to hold the same melody line.
I was going to ask you, how did you work on your voice? I mean, you mentioned emotions, and of course it's clear when one hears you, the part of the emotions. But at the same time, let's face it, you have an incredible technique, and the high notes, for instance.
But I got rid of them.
How did you work on it?
Well, I got rid of them. I mean, I kissed them goodbye when I knew my game as that guy was up. You know, you can't use the same boat for the whole of your life. You've got.
But still today.
Well, now I got it.
Today,
well,
you
now
still
I
go
got
very
it,
high sometimes.
Yeah, well, I got it back again. So I went back to the big
How
voice.
did you work on your voice?
Well, once I immersed myself with the kind of the royalty of Nashville, you know, and and then on with again with Patty Griffin, who had just the previous year got a Grammy for top gospel album. She was very embarrassed, she said, because Mavis Staples came to her to celebrate it, and you know, Mavis is like she sits at the right hand of God as far as we're all concerned, you know. So having learnt this structure of singing, I really was missing the kind of free form element, because I'd been with this structure for quite a long time. And a structure which vocally you can't leave, you have to stay with the note. So when I came back to the UK, I joined up with the guys I'd been working with in the early parts of 2001 to Strange Sensation. And we got this new drummer in, and Juldeh from West Africa, from the Gambia. And we started the ability to sing within the energy that we were creating. It wouldn't have been appropriate to use the other voice, the Nashville voice. So I just started to kick it up. And now my voice is really strong, and because I sing 4 or 5 times a week now, it's opened up more and more and more. And, you know, last night it was a Memorex advert. I expected a glass to break. It was great. I just going, sheesh. Because when you create a criteria as a singer, once you start losing that, it's the first thing that the media will say, oh, can't do that anymore. We can't do that anymore. And how many musicians are, you know, especially trumpeters and people like that, top C, where's top C, you know? It's all that stuff about they make you and then they break you. So it's been quite an adventure for me to find that I've actually got that voice back, especially now, you know, when
fabulous.
people help me across the road now, you know. Oh, he looks like he needs some help in the traffic.
But I mean, if I compare, you know, the concert you did here in Switzerland, Paleo, a few years ago, and the concert that you're about to give, and which I have seen that was broadcast by BBC the other day. This year's concert is fabulous. I mean, I must personally say, I personally, this is my opinion, I just love it so much, the one that you're doing this year. I think it's how can I say, we are with Robert Plant again. It seems to me much more so. Do you feel that yourself?
Well, I don't know how many RPs there are, but this one is one that has a lot of fun. I mean, the sparkle between us, and the moments within the structures of the songs where there is a place to go, which is uncharted, and I can just come in anywhere singing. I can, you know, do cross rhythms and miss all my cues, and we start laughing. And it's a great free-form place. So if you're happy and you're not under the constraint of actually having to repeat. I mean, I wish I could play, there's a beautiful piano in there. I wish I could play the piano really well. But when I've had a bottle of red wine, I think I'm great. But best not to do that on stage. Best not to be too serious about my limitations. Best to just enjoy it. And I think really, you know, I do embrace my life as an entertainer. I'm not hiding anything. I do what I do, and there are new gods, and they're very good too. And you don't hear my songs on the radio, so people don't really sing along with them. So you go to big festivals, and I'm sort of underground now. You know, I'm not courant, but I'm not, legend really. I'm just working. It's like a kind of hit and run job. Last night we played and it was just tremendous, and we laughed and laughed, and we came off stage and we all sort of group together, and I said, if I never sang again in my life, last night was the best I ever sang, because my heart was so full of joy with this melange. It's great.
Why did you choose this name of your band, the Sensational Space Shifters?
But because that's what we are, and I wanted to. My previous adventure with them was Strange Sensation, so sensation carries on. We are moving through different musical genre. I mean, Justin Adams is. He's produced 2 of the Tonaro albums. He's worked with Jar Wobble. He's worked with Sinead O'Connor. He's avoided all the kind of that world of rock cliche. There's nobody in the band that's ever been in a rock band, except for me. And really, I think that Led Zeppelin was way beyond a rock band. Paige and I traveled a lot through Morocco and Thailand and India, and recorded ourselves and recorded other people everywhere. So I was in a particularly interesting group in those days. So to be with these guys now, when none of them have chosen that obvious brain-numbing path, means that none of us see the obvious rock proposal, which means that we have a really delightful time. We can be very, very heavy without actually going back to any of the old cliches.
In your band, there's a Gambian musician, and we can see this African influence. Where does your attraction for African music come from?
Well, I'm not a world musician, although I've masqueraded occasionally as being part of world music festivals and stuff. I'm basically one of those birds that sees something sparkle and flies down and steals it. And so I've had a romance with the rhythms of the Atlas Mountains in Morocco, and with the vocal scales that are there, and especially the music of the Atlas, the Berber music. It's really very compelling to me, and it's not a delicate, gentle expression. It's ferocious. It's really quite something. It's not the coffee table side of enjoying music from another culture. It's the kind of compulsion and a lot of the time now that when we play live, it's all about those rhythms with the bendias from North Africa. We all play them, and it's so. I mean, I'm sure that we could be employed to help the Gnawa in Morocco to clean up the vibrations in people's houses if we just went through playing away and come out the other side and everybody feel okay, I mean, that's really what music should be. It doesn't have to be just a study in dexterity. And so I think I was drawn to that. I've been going to North Africa now for over 40 years, so, I'm picking it up.
In your new album, there's a very tender song called Rainbow. Where does the inspiration come from?
Well, lyrically, I'm basically bailing out of any responsibility for anybody else's emotions. I'm just offering my hand when all the trauma is over. It's kind of quite glib, really. I just basically will do anything I can to make people feel okay, but don't expect me to save the day. Uh-huh. It's when I explained it to a lady friend of mine, she said, oh dear. She thought it was one of those joyous moments where I'll look after everything. And I'm saying, I'll be around after the event. Uh-huh. When you got it sorted out, I'll be there,
You were part of a huge youth movement that wanted to change the world, and now you're welcomed by everyone, including by Obama. Do you still think today that music can and will change the world eventually?
No, I think it's a panacea. I think it is a prescription to take away some of the pain and the stress and the anguish. But the great orators of music, Dylan and on through, the people that had so much to say, the cause and effect of a particular period of popular music into society, it had amazing resonance once upon a time. There was a sort of huge movement to question so much of the decision making in the United States and Britain and the corruption and everything that we know about. Now we're the material age and the age of IT and all that sort of thing. The whole thing, appears to me, I look now for the people who carry the torch. And there's so much going on. For a while, maybe black urban music was doing some stuff, it was laying it down, not just for the black community, but either I'm not aware of it or I just see music as being that release. It's what I want to hear, but I'm not encouraged to take up arms. I don't hear anybody singing about Blair and his responsibilities now, but he has some.
Well, I have one last question, and so this is one day when you said that you could have led other lives, you could have done other things, and I remember you saying that you were interested in teaching. Could you imagine you being a teacher, and why would that interest you particularly?
Well, I've always been really hungry for knowledge, but in my case, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing because first of all, I find it very hard to store knowledge, but at the same time, I love the idea of illuminating. And having had kids and having grandchildren and being in a semi-rural society for a long, long time in the same place most of my life, I'm very attached to the concept of community and family and stuff. And when my kids were young, they attended a Rudolf Steiner, Waldorf Steiner school. And I really liked the process of children being encouraged to blossom before they were bludgeoned, But now, I don't know. Perhaps I'd be better off being a gardener's assistant. Peter Sellers in Being There, that last movie he made, where everything that he said that was considered to be profound was actually some vague terminology from his work in the garden, and everybody took it as being manna from heaven. It's very funny. Yeah, I think I'll stay with the rural plan now.
Robert Plant, thank you very, very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the concert tomorrow here in Montreux.
Thank you very much.